Welcome to Built with Grit. I am your host and strategic partner in cost reduction, Luis Fernandez. And today I'm joined by my friend Brandon Bridges. We're going to talk a little bit about the Great Resignation. He's got his own podcast called the B Squared Podcast. I listened to, I think it was like an hour-long show that you did there. And I sent him a message and was like, hey, you should come on here and tell this story. So Brandon, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit, I guess, kind of like the high level thought process of what that video was about, what you were talking about, and what you're kind of bringing to the light for people to understand about the job market right now.
So I'll introduce B Squared first. So B Squared is just, it's got a lot of bells and whistles, but it started out as just a vlog and just for whatever I happened to be thinking about on the day I produced. And the episode on the Great Resignation was actually, I'm not going to say it was unplanned, but call it what it is. It was unplanned. I had initially planned on doing something else in that slot, but I'm going to limit what I say here. But I heard a couple of stories from people I had once worked with, and hearing what they were going through in their workplace, I'm like, you know what? I've got to come off the bench. I can't really help because I'm not there anymore, but I've got to do something. So the best thing I could do was leverage the platform that I had, and being a content creator, when in doubt, create content.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it is very well produced. I mean, like I said, I coach this with like, hey, mine is just a recording of you and I having a conversation, man. Like it's not so if you want like a highly produced version and much better of this conversation, then definitely and we'll link it somewhere for folks to check that out, because I think it's worthwhile. So yeah, and I think it's an interesting perspective. The sad part about your video, you tell a little bit about the story of kind of this toxic I think it's more than one actually, of these toxic managers. But the thing is, the sad part is that it's not unique. It's not just your story. And this is the part it's hard for me to convey to folks, that just about everybody's had that terrible manager. So you probably have one in your organization, right? Like, stop pretending that this is everyone else's problem. This is you too, right? So tell us a little bit about that, and then maybe we can talk about how do we identify that person if they're underneath us in a leadership capacity.
Yes. So where to start? There's a lot to unpack on this topic, but you're right. The first thing is, big numbers get people's attention. So after I posted that video, I went back to BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and pulled some updated numbers. And all told, we had, I think the figure was somewhere around 35 million quits last year. Of those, 1 in 7, I think they said, were directly because of toxic workplaces and toxic leadership. So that means, if my math is right, 5 million were entirely preventable. I mean, 5 million quit. Think about that. 5 million people walked off the jobs when the power was entirely with their companies to stop it. There may have been other causes among the other 30 million that were preventable, but we're just focusing on this one. And I will say that the experience just around the episode itself, I posted it on YouTube, obviously, but I pushed it out on Twitter, LinkedIn, every other platform I could get. And the response has been incredible. I mean, people have messaged me privately by the score to share their experiences. And I thought my experience was bad, but I've heard from what some other people have been going through, and it's insane what some companies are allowing to happen on their doorsteps. And the 2 stories that I shared, neither one was told in its entirety. I kind of sanitized them a little bit for the YouTube audience, but in both cases, it was a case of a company culture gone rotten, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And one of the bigger things that I've that I've heard over the course of the last 2 years has been, well, we don't want people to work from home or be remote because culture would suffer. And everyone says that culture is about collaboration, about all the positive buzzwords.
Hmm.
But what I've been saying since long before that episode went live was a lot of company cultures are really about control. And I think that's where a lot of these toxic managers are really coming from. You're
Hmm.
getting people in management positions that care more about their egos, their position, their image, about themselves than getting the job done. And in the two stories I shared, that was a common theme. And it's something that's, again, entirely preventable. I've been in leadership positions more times than I can count. Um, it's not hard to be a positive influence with your people.
Right.
And it's not hard to be willing to take constructive criticism from your people, and moreover to value that criticism. So to people who don't get it, I don't get those who don't get it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've been in leadership 20 years. I wrote a book about leadership myself. It's called Keep on Leading. And I had talked about ego and how that is oftentimes that is the counter to good leadership, right? So the great leader is humble, the toxic manager is egotistical, right? So it's kind of like these diametrically opposed views. And it's interesting that you're talking about the control thing and how what ends up happening, I think, the reason some of these folks get promoted, and one of the things I talk about in the book is that oftentimes a good individual contributor isn't going to be a great leader. Yeah, and we need to be able to separate those two things. That you can be great at your job. You can be great when you are doing a task. You can work hard and all of these things. It doesn't mean that you inspire people to follow you.
You're absolutely right. And the missing link, I think, is I was an individual contributor for a lot longer than I've been a leader. And what separates, like you said, the empathetic leaders from the control freaks is an awareness that just because someone else can do something I can't, it doesn't diminish me. And I mean, realistically, that's one of the control freaks want to puff up and do threat displays and all that other good stuff to make themselves look powerful. And one of the stories that I told was about was about a manager for whom incompetent isn't strong enough a word, but I don't know a potent enough synonym. But um, this was a guy who came in and he was all about I'm in charge, and
Mm.
he that was all he cared about. He didn't learn anything about how we did what we did, about what we did. I will tell you directly, I set up a new line of business effort in that environment that at first I tried to play the game the right way and let this toxic boss be involved. He created a bunch of roadblocks and a bunch of headaches. The makers of Excedrin drew a lot of profit during those few months. Um, but then I became known as the guy who's always offering Excedrin to everybody. Um, but then I find one day I went in and I said, I've had enough of this. And even though I wasn't a manager in rank, I did the work of a manager. I made the calls, I acted as creative director, I okayed every creative decision. And all of a sudden, with him out of the picture, the problems went away
Mm.
because they had someone who actually understood the work. And I had two other developers working under me. And I'm not going to tell you that it was always easy. At first, one of them bristled at the fact that I was seemingly taking responsibility beyond my role. And, I had to kind of smooth over those rough edges. But the difference between my leadership style and that of this manager was when that team member said to me, I feel like you don't trust me and I feel like you're trying to micromanage me. I didn't respond right away. I took that back to my desk and I said, okay, this is not what I intended to send across.
Mm.
So what do I need to do to fix this? And I thought about it, and I didn't realize at the time that I had conveyed that. So I didn't know how to fix it. So I did the only other thing that made sense. I went and I asked the teammate, what concrete action can I take to show you that I trust you? And the look I got was one of like surprise. Like, when you get one of those checks from Ed McMahon, it was that kind of expression. And the answer was, well, I don't know. And I said, well, I'd like you to think about it. And if you come up with something, let me know.
Yeah.
It was it That's one of the biggest things you can do. Don't When someone says, well, I feel like you're trying to micromanage me and that you don't trust me, a lot of the people that I've dealt with in my career would puff up and say, well, that's too bad. You're not here to have feelings. I said, I respect your feelings. What can I do to make things better?
Yeah, I'll tell you that that's too bad you're not here for feelings, or if you don't like it, you can leave, or this generation is lazy. I don't know, whatever kind of version of that you want to put, basically discounting a person's opinion when they decided to tell you about how you were making them feel. If that's the route you choose to take, if you have uttered any of those terms, understand that you're already on the wrong track, right? You're already approaching this through the egotistical mindset. You're diminishing that person. And if the situation was reversed and someone was diminishing your opinions and your feelings, you probably would get upset about it. So just know that if these are words in your vocabulary, your team already has a resume out there. And as soon as they get a better opportunity, they're leaving, and you've given them the excuse of doing that.
And I can't plus one that statement enough. Um, so things with that toxic manager, I touched on this indirectly in the episode, but I want to expand on it here. So I touched on the end of that story with that toxic manager. What I didn't say outright was, unbeknownst to that employer, I I was fed up, and I just decided one day, you know what? I'm just going to job hunt. And like you said, first good offer I get, I'm out of here. Well, this is what happened. On a Sunday afternoon, I made my resume searchable on a particular job board. Monday morning, before I even got out of bed, an email had come in saying, hey, I found your resume. I want to talk to you. And the question was basically, how much would it cost me to hire you away from where you are? So we went through the entire recruiting and hiring process invisibly to my existing employer. And then when an offer letter came in, I signed it and sent it back. And then the next day, I sent my boss's boss an email that said, here you go. Opportunities come up that I'm interested in pursuing. I'm here for 2 more weeks and then I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And, it's,
At that point, it's too late, right? So
yes,
they're not going to be able to win you back. But it's important to know that. So if we're let's talk to that manager's manager now, kind of that senior leader. Turnover is a decent representation of the toxicity of a manager, right? Your turnover should be somewhere in the 7 to 10% range. All right. When it shoots up past that, and if you're pushing the 40 and 50% range turnover, you have a leadership problem. And you may be the leadership problem also, by the way. Like if your choice is I'm only going to pay X, and you've convinced yourself that you're paying market rates, but your turnover is 50%, it could be that when it gets that high, that may be something that, there's your words and values, whatever. It's a good time to take a look, and creating a situation where someone feels comfortable in an exit interview, to be honest with you. That's going to be important too, but I doubt you'll get honest answers in exit interviews, because I know I never gave an honest answer in an exit interview. I don't know if I'm the only one, but that's,
all I can say to that, and I'm going to say this very, very carefully, is I have shared various flavors of candor in my exit interviews. And I will tell you, this particular one, they got it from me with both barrels, but it wasn't with the manager's manager. It was with HR. And this kind of touches on what I mentioned earlier about culture. We talk about culture problems. A lot of people think that it's department specific, and to a degree it is, but overall, your company has to have the right kind of culture, and it has to be enforceable from top to bottom, right? So this is why I say this particular company had a culture problem that went to the top, nor is it the only example. So this, the travails with this toxic manager lasted a total of 3 years. For two of those, I considered him legitimately toxic. But it wasn't just me. Like the rest of my team, several members of my team, I should say, that I know of, felt the same way. And all of us took kind of the same action. We engaged with the guy himself. He didn't want to hear anything from us. Uh, then we went to the layer above him, who was basically empowered just to go like this to him, was not authorized to do anything else. So then we went to the layer above him, the program manager. Still nothing changed. Then we went to HR. And at one point, HR actually reached out to us and said, "We're hearing about problems. What's going on?" That was still about a year and a half before I left. So the fact that this was allowed to go on for so long with so many different layers involved, and here's another big number for you that I'm aware of between myself and others, we engaged with management and HR almost 50 times over a period of about 2 years. Now let that sink in. 50 times over 24 months. And still, this guy was allowed to keep his job. And if you've watched the episode, that infamous day when he said, "This is the way I've always communicated, and this is the way I'm always going to communicate," that was when he got called out by the whole team for being aggressive when he didn't need to be.
Right.
I mean, that was still a good bit of time before I left, but that was the moment when I realized, all right, I've had a bad feeling about this guy from the beginning. This is the moment when I know I was right. But at any rate, the fact that so many layers and so many people had heard from us so many times and things didn't get better, that's why I say the company had a culture problem.
Yeah, it's interesting that so I recently posted a video that I saw of an entire team going in to quit together. And apparently the story has to do with, a manager, the good manager getting fired unjustly by a toxic leader or whatever it may be. And I basically said, hey, look, if you're a business owner and you have a toxic manager underneath you, you have not only do you have a responsibility to your employees, but you have a fiscal responsibility. If you care nothing about the people that work for you, you have a fiscal responsibility to find those people and root them out, because they cost a lot of money. How much is it going to cost you? First off, in this case, it was an entire team of people. I mean, it was like 7 or 8 employees all at the same time in one store. It looked like it was an entire store of people, of employees that quit.
Was this the Burger King thing?
I don't know exactly which store it was, but I mean, it really kind of irrelevant, right? Like if you're losing an entire team, an entire shift of folks, that is an entire shift that you have lost, that you cannot operate, and you probably have to close the doors temporarily, at least for that day, until you start reshuffling, and then you have to rehire, and there's a host of costs that come with training and all of these things. That person, so I guess the question would be, is if you do that math and you figure, well, let's say it's on the low end, because let's say these are like minimum wage workers and they're only going to cost you $7,000 each to replace. Are you going to give that toxic manager a $50,000 raise from whatever you're paying them? Are you going to give them an extra 50 grand? Because you're going to spend an extra 50 grand to deal with all the problems that they created, at least, if not more than that. So if you're not willing to give your toxic manager a 50% raise, maybe get rid of them, right? Like this is
Well, the thing that galls me is, one, the fact that you gave that description and it triggered multiple potential hits. Like this could be this could be that. I mean, that's bad. And this is the era of the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah.
And people are walking away in droves. But like you said, then you're left with the company. If there's any justice, I should say, then the company is left with egg on their faces, because think about it. Undoubtedly, all those employees who walked off the job didn't just wake up that day and say, "Today I verily shall quit." I mean, realistically, if they're normal people, which there's some people out there, but if they're normal people, they undoubtedly complained and promoted awareness that there was a problem. And if the company in your story did what I've seen more than one company do, they backed the toxic manager, like HR at the company I just described. Their refrain was, well, we support the managers. And I'm like, all righty, in my best Bill Engvall voice. Um, but what happens when the situation that you just described plays out and what the company is left with, they don't have their employees anymore, at least for one shift, but they do still have that toxic manager. Now ask yourself, can one manager, even the best manager you could find on their best day, roided up on 10 cups of coffee, can they make up the difference for what those employees were doing? No. So what has the company done to themselves? Like you said, they've inflicted the equivalent of a gunshot wound on themselves fiscally. And the company should say, okay, we just lost a bunch of hardworking people and we're left with one guy or gal who can't make up the difference themselves. What did we do wrong here?
Right. No, what's funny is that I actually had a comment on the page that said, if you listen to anyone under 30, every manager is toxic. I need way more information than what's provided in this video. Right. And the guy is an executive, so according to his LinkedIn thing. And my thought immediately was like, this is why these people survive. This is why you survive, because this is this generation. That's what that is, right? Mm-hmm. This generation, what this generation has that no generation prior to, and the reason I think this Great Resignation thing is kind of taken off, is that we have access now to information that job seekers or employees have never had in the past. I can go on Glassdoor, I can type in my qualifications, and I will get a salary estimate based on my experience. And I will know exactly where my company pays people with my job and my salary. And I can see where I stand and I can see where other people are. And because of this thing, like we're doing right now, I don't have to just work in Tucson, Arizona. I can work anywhere. And the truth is, for pretty much everybody, except obviously jobs where you actually have to put your fingers on the thing that you're doing, so there's exceptions, manufacturing and, a lot of the, service-based jobs. But for anything that can be done remotely, now it can be done remotely. If you don't have to physically be there to do anything. So now you have an employee with access to information that they didn't previously have, the ability to make these contacts, job boards that make them easy to contact. They don't have to go buy a Sunday paper from Buffalo, New York to search through the classifieds to find a job, right? And like you said, you uploaded your resume and the next day you had an email saying, hey, you want a job, right? Like
which was crazy. And I heard from someone on LinkedIn today that had the same thing happen to her. I mean, it's crazy.
You can't. So when I was an employee, I was a leader and I had other managers below me, right? So I had kind of a large team. And one of my employees, one of the workers, I saw a lot of potential. I knew that there was a lot of leadership potential with this guy. It was like, this dude he's the future. And so I was fighting to get this guy a raise. He was seriously underpaid because he had started with the company from the very beginning. He wasn't hired in and was basically getting a 3% raise every year. And he started at like $12 an hour. So, I mean, I can't remember exactly now. I want to say it was like, he was making like 21 bucks and he was probably performing at the $27, $28 level. And he was training people that were making more money than him. And I was like, hey, we got to give this guy a raise. We're going to lose this guy. We're going to lose this guy. Came up with a whole plan on how to do it. And when it came time to do it, and it was like, I got fought so hard on this $2 raise. And he ended up leaving. Right. And it was like, well, saw that coming. Right. He left and he got like a $4 pay raise when he left. And I kind of thought about that. And I explained to my boss at the time. And I said, I want you to understand that we lost this guy over $8,000. Okay. That's what it cost us to lose that guy. Now, let me ask you, to replace him, will it cost us more than $8,000? And there was like this long pause because he knew exactly. And he's like, where are you coming up with that $8,000? I was like, it's 2,000 hours a year times 4. Okay. That's what we lost an employee over. $8,000. Somebody who had been at this company for 10 years, had tons of knowledge, was training people, had leadership potential. We will not replace that guy. We're going to find somebody off the street paying him exactly what we were paying this other dude. And it's going to take 10 years to get him to that same level, over $8,000. Right.
What you just described is a symptom of many, many different types of culture problems. But what I like to go back to is you look at the question of RTO that's swirling around the business world right now. What fraction of executives want a hard RTO? Like if they could have it, what fraction of them would want it right now, or what percentage?
I don't know.
76.
Okay.
What percentage of employees want RTO right now? 34. That alone tells me just how bad the disconnect is between the people up top and the people who are actually making them money. And a lot of other problems, like what you just described, fit that model perfectly.
Yeah. Return to office, by the way, for anybody that got confused about RTO there. Yeah. So overwhelming majority of executives want to go back to, they got the great parking spot, man. Yeah. So there's what's this guy on the Dan Price, right?
I don't gravity payments guy.
Yeah, I don't agree with everything that he says, right? Like, yes. I think he goes a little off on some things, but he does understand that as a capitalist, we know about the law of supply and demand, and we know a lot about pricing. We're very good at pricing products. And we can go out to the marketplace and say, okay, what value are we providing versus the competition? Where can we fall? How many sales are we going to have? You know, every dollar that we go up and down is going to affect our sales percentage. We find that one that meets, just perfect for us. And that's how we set our price. And when it comes to setting the value of employees, what do? We look at the revenue side, and then we figure out how much we're going to pay. That you're not doing the math doesn't work that way, right? It's the exact same model that you use to price a product is the price for the employee. And this is where you get those discrepancies. There was a company local here that had an opening for a marketing person. And somebody said, hey, check out this job description. And so, I'm a former marketer as well. So I go and I look at this job description, and they were looking for a copywriter, an ad person, an events person, a website developer, all of the in one. And they were going to pay this person $40,000 a year.
No. I can sympathize with that. The environment that I was in where I started that line of business effort. So I was getting paid to be basically an entry-level person. But I was serving as a video editor, a creative director, a trainer, because I was doing some training of junior employees too. I was QCing output, doing quality checks and quality assurance. I was interfacing directly with our customers. I was briefing executive level people, like vice presidents at that company knew my name. And one knew that I love to wear lime shirts on Fridays. So, and a coworker of mine actually went to my boss's boss and told him, look, Brandon's doing 6 figures worth of work, but I know what you're paying him, and you're paying him a lot less than that. And the answer was, according to what I was told, the answer was an apathetic, yeah, I know. And I'm like, well, there you have it.
Right.
So when an opportunity came along to go elsewhere for more money, I took it.
It was interesting to me that, I would make tens of thousands of dollar decisions a day for whatever reason in manufacturing and service, whatever it was. I would on the fly, standing on an assembly line, and make a $10,000 decision. And I made those constantly. That's why I got paid for my job, was to make those expensive decisions. But if I wanted to make a $2,000 pay decision, it had to go to like the vice president or the president level to make that call. Right. And what was really wild was when I was interviewing somebody and we were doing negotiations, it was me on the phone with this person, and they would say, actually, I need like $1.50 more. And I would think about it for a second and say, okay, yeah, sure, that works. and give them the $1.50. Right. I was authorized to make that call, but for the people that I already had inside, I couldn't say, hey, that person deserves an extra $1.50. I have to turn in this entire packet and defend it and make all of this stuff. And as a leader that cared about people, like that was something that I was willing to do the effort in. But I'm thinking this is why a lot of people aren't getting pay raises, because we make it so difficult. And so I just wonder sometimes, like, I understand it's a permanent cost increase when you do that, but what is your turnover costing you? And if you could, in that example of this guy, going back in time, would that company spend $8,000 to save themselves the cost of having to replace that guy? How many companies would go back if you could just go and find all the employees that left that were great, that you wish hadn't left? How much would it have cost you to keep them? And how much did it cost you to replace them? And have you replaced them in their productivity levels yet? And maybe soften your heart when it comes to pay raises and, getting rid of bad managers now.
And you just touched on something that I've been dying to point out this whole time, which is, so the examples that we're discussing sound like they're coming from the retail background, right? And objectively, people in that industry have gotten terrible treatment all along, and they do make up a good chunk of the people that are leaving. But what happens when the Great Resignation comes for people that are working knowledge jobs?
Right.
Then the footprint of them leaving is so much larger. And I've said this one for years, but when people decide that they're fed up and they're going to walk away, it's not going to start with the guy sweeping the floors in the hallway.
Your best guy first.
Yep. And that was what happened in that environment that I talked about earlier. I was the first one to leave. And when I left, like I said, I didn't get a manager. I didn't get a manager's manager. I didn't get an HR rep. I got the director of HR for the company. And they asked me, they asked me at least 5 times. You know how people ask you the same question 5 different ways, trying to get a different answer? They asked me, well, what made you start job hunting? What turned your opinion? What made you want to leave? And I gave them that toxic manager's name every single time, because I know what they're saying. There must be something besides this terrible guy. It's like, nope. To a guy like me, I'm a millennial. I've got skills that are in demand. I've had people knocking at my door for more than a year now saying, please come work for us. And I've been saying, no, I don't want to move. I don't want to change jobs. I want to stay where I'm at and try to salvage this. But the moment that I realized it was unsalvageable, I put in my notice when I got an offer. And here's the thing. When I socialized it within my team first before I told management that I was leaving. This is what happened. Brandon, you're taking the brunt of this guy's bad mood right now. But what happens when you leave and he turns his attention to us? And I said, here's what you do. They did it after I left. It happened exactly the way that they were afraid it would. And when at least one other employee used the phrase hostile work environment, I used that phrase before I left, and they shrugged it off and said, meh, we don't care. But someone else used it, and all of a sudden, I talked to the manager not that long after the boss's boss, because the boss got fired. So I talked to my boss's boss, even though he wasn't still my boss. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I talked to him a little bit after that, and he lasted less than 90 days after I left. And my supposition is the company had been buying his excuse that, well, Brandon's the problem. But when Brandon left and wasn't there to be his foil anymore, he turned his attention to others, and they started hearing complaints from them. And all of a sudden, can't be Brandon. He's not here. So what's the common denominator? So you mentioned earlier, how do we identify these types of bad people if they're below us? It's easy to identify them if they're above us. Here's how things kind of unfolded here. And this is a cautionary tale for anyone who has direct reports or indirect reports. This guy that I'm describing was charismatic. I call him a narcissist because he displayed all the signs of being a clinical narcissist. But his method was kick down and kiss up.
Yep. Always.
So those above him didn't want to believe us when we told them what was happening. You know, they maybe slap them on the wrist a little bit, and then things might change for a day or two, but then it would go back to the status quo. But like I said, we went to HR and management almost 50 times among us, and that's just the ones I know about. So to anyone that's out there and would wants to know how to identify these people, here it is. You listen to your employees. If someone is coming to you and saying there's a problem, take it seriously. Listen to what your employees are telling you. Now, yes, occasionally you will have someone with an axe to grind or an agenda. That's why you talk to other people, substantiate if you can, dismiss if you can't. That said, 50 by any unit of measure was way too much. So you need to you need to have behavioral standards. That's a given across the board. And it can't be one set of standards for managers and one for employees. But track violations, and if you can verify and substantiate enough complaints, I say 3 strikes, you're out. But whatever number you pick, if you can substantiate enough complaints, even if they're all minor, you need to take action. Period.
So I was trying to find the spot in my book where I talk about how, you know, kind of a strategy, right? So a strategy that you can implement that can be a tool with an action. So let me ask you this question. Did you ever have a one-to-one conversation that was regularly scheduled with your boss's boss?
Regularly scheduled, no. I would drop by his office unprompted and uninvited, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
and kind of unload on him. But regular skips, no.
Yeah. So that's what happens, right? This is the open door policy that people do. And they assume that the open door is enough. Like, I don't need to do it. So, and that's crap. It's not enough is what I'm trying to say. So, as a leader, my direct reports had monthly one-to-ones with me. By the way, the one-to-one is not a task list conversation. It's about, and if you want more detail on that, I have written on this topic extensively of what a one-to-one looks like, but it's about, you know, relationship building. Talk to me about, you know, what made me think about it. Also, you went to that guy who said you were micromanaging him and you asked, how can I do this differently? Really what you're doing in a one-to-one is you're asking someone how they want to be led. It's basically like buying a video game and then going and getting the book that tells you exactly how to play the video game. And they're going to give it to you, right? Because you're going to ask those questions. 2 levels down, you should be doing quarterly. And right now, somebody's listening to this, maybe, I don't know, of the 7 people that are listening to them, let's assume one of them thinks to himself, I don't have time for that. What you have chosen is not to prioritize that activity. You have time for stuff. You just choose what you're going to prioritize. For example, right now, I don't have time to sit in a hospital room, but with the right phone call of somebody that I love, all of a sudden it becomes a priority. And guess what? I have time for it today. So I don't want to hear about that. It's not about having time. It's about setting priorities straight. You need to prioritize one-to-ones, do them with your direct reports every single month, do them 2 levels down every quarter. Now, if you're very senior level and you have many levels down below, then you should be also targeting certain people at lower levels of the organization to go and do them. And guess what? When you do them, everybody underneath you is going to do it too, because they don't want their employees saying, wait a second, the CEO just did a one-to-one with me, but you're not going to talk to me about my goals and hopes and dreams or whatever. So one-to-ones, if you're not doing them, it could be costing you a whole bunch of money because you could have this toxic festering wound in your organization that you don't know about because you're not having those conversations. That's my thought.
Now, you saw me jubilating a minute ago, and the reason is he's touching on something that is so critical. And this is what I wanted to say. You are so right. You need to do them, but it's not, in my experience, it's not enough just to do them. You have to do them with purpose, and you have to do them right. Because this is the thing. I spent most of 2021 reading articles after article after article after article about this company is so surprised that their people are leaving. And some of those companies I know for a fact were doing what you just described. They were doing engagement surveys, they were doing pulse surveys, yada, yada, yada. The fact that they were still surprised tells me they were doing it wrong.
Mm.
And the thing, when I talked about this, I talked about this on LinkedIn a few months ago, and it was pointed out to me that if I knew it, I just didn't think about it when I wrote it. But uh, people, when they're sitting with you, may not give you the full story. Just think about it. Every time an employee gets one of those pulse surveys, like it or not, in the 21st century, we're all thinking they say it's anonymous, but we're doing this on company gear. And oh, look, there's a URL with a unique identifier. Yeah. And you expect us to believe they can't track it back to us?
Mm.
So there's always, in the back of that mind, there's always that speck of doubt about companies retaliating if they get feedback they don't like. And I have always felt like you feel that one-to-ones, face-to-faces are the best way to circumvent that. However, the first time it has to be about establishing trust. Leaders have to actively cultivate the trust of their employees, or they're all going to get shocked when people leave. I actually wrote an article that describes the two Rashomon style, the two perspectives of I'm a manager and I'm sending an engagement survey, and I'm an employee who is receiving one.
Mm.
And my personal opinion is it's a good read, but I'll leave that determination to others. But the point is, any leader who wants an honest, open, and candid conversation to happen has to first prove that they are trustworthy. I mean, what's your experience been in that field?
So this is kind of, I got a funny story on engagement surveys. So I don't believe in them. So we had one at a company that I worked for. We got the engagement survey. Everybody on the team was very honest about what was going on and, the situation we were having with our manager. Survey results came out. My manager and his boss came to the team and presented the survey results and essentially created goals for all of us to work on to fix the problems that we had identified with the manager. So everyone on the team got more work that we had to put as our annual goals that were going to directly result in whether or not we got raises based on things that we had identified as problems in the survey. It was just like, we all kind of walked out of there and was like, not only did nothing change, but now I got more stuff that I have to do because of this. So what happened on the next survey? 555, 5555, all the way down. Didn't even read the questions. It was like, yep. Perfect. Everything. And they were like, we fixed it. Look at where this team was before and where they are now. Cause we're not stupid. Like, I'm not going to give myself more work.
They didn't fix a thing. All they did was create a situation where people didn't want to report legitimate issues. That's it. That's crazy. And they call that improvement? That's crazy. That's craziness. And that's the polite term for it.
So after that, I just, I don't think surveys are the answer. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been leading teams for 20 years. And what I have found, I've tried all the ideas. I've been through all the different leadership courses from all the different people. I've done the 5 days, the 3 days, the 1 monthers. I've been in combat and led teams there as well. I've done it all. If you have a leadership book, I've probably read it. Actually, I stopped reading John C. Maxwell. You read one, you got it all, right? Like it's, and I'm pretty sure a lot of it is like regurgitated. I know whoever you're going to tell me, have you read? Yes, I know the guy. I know what they're saying. Let me tell you what works. Conversations with people. People are not objective things. They're not 2 + 2 = 4. It will never be that way. I don't care what personality test you love, whether it's the DISC or the Myers-Briggs or whatever. It's people are not concrete. They will be different. I am different in the morning than I am in the afternoon. I'm different. If I got a phone call and I just got yelled at from my wife, and then you come up to my desk, you're not going to get the happy-go-lucky guy, the ENFTJ or whatever the hell it is. You're going to get somebody different because I'm not in a good mood anymore, right? Like it's the conversation flow map that, we're going to circle around and it's going to, no, that's not how conversation works. That's it.
Hearing you say that, one of the signs that kind of makes me draw back from people is when they seem more interested in quoting in quoting theory than they are in actually talking.
Mm.
And what you just said is brilliant. Just sit down and have an actual conversation with people can solve so many problems. The minute that I'm in with a manager and I start hearing them talking about, well, according to this theory, or I hear him use buzzwords like, could you do this moving forward instead of saying, hey, how about doing this? I'm like,
Mm.
you're not really talking to me as much as you're talking at me and trying to impress me. And oh, there's so much more to unpack on that topic. But the short version is, for anybody who's listening, he is right on the money. Just talk to people like logical, sensible human beings and watch how quickly your problems melt away. Like, seriously.
Yep. And having that right attitude, it all starts, the first third of my book is all about yourself. This is a leadership book, and I don't even talk about leading teams that till the last, and it's the shortest section. Most of it is internal. It's you. It's how do I fix me so that I can be a better leader? And how do I, approach the situation? I never know. You never know who you're going to get. I don't care how much you know somebody. I'm sure you've had a conversation with you have a conversation with your partner and you're like, wow, that was not how I expected that to go. Right. But the reason you get through that is because you're coming at it from a point of caring and love and empathy for that other person. So if that is how you were approaching situations as a leader, that conversation, however way it flows, which will never be that nice little circle that they taught you in the course that you went to for 3 days, and then you took the little binder back to work that your company paid $5,000 for, and the binder ended up somewhere in your locker, and you never looked at it again because as soon as you got back to work, you had 700 emails because you've been gone for a week, and you went back into your old habits. That conversation flow map, that one is not true, and it will never work. You have to have, I just saved your company $5,000. Go talk to your people and do so with a good attitude and caring about them. And that is how you nurture leadership and make people want to follow you.
Don't forget active listening.
Yes. I mean, this is the biblical model. If you want to look at like when, if you're a Christian, when God himself came down, what did he do? He led through empathy. He told stories and he listened to people.
On the list of things I wasn't expecting to hear today, that is number 3.
That's great. That's great, man.
With number 2 being, we're the Waffle House and we have no waffles.
So why don't you tell us like where somebody could go and look at, or, find your information if they're interested in hearing more about some of these articles or hearing this podcast, which I'll link again, like I said, somewhere, but I'm not like very YouTube savvy. So it's going to be like not in a great place for anybody that's used to being on the platform.
Here's the worst kept secret of the YouTube verse. Nobody's YouTube savvy. Lucky. So if anyone who's interested in hearing more of my random musings, look me up on LinkedIn. My name is Brandon Bridges. On YouTube, look me up. B Squared 2021 is my YouTube channel. B Squared, the podcast, covers a range of topics. We've had 2 on gaming so far, plus the one on the Great Resignation. We're looking at doing some spots on technology in the future. And if there's a specific topic that you guys are interested in hearing about, shoot me a note or leave a comment. B Squared this is the thing. B Squared is just as much about starting conversations as it is anything else. Every episode ends with, what's your take? Along with a couple of questions that, I want to hear from people on. Response has been mixed, but when people tell me what they think, they're contributing, and that's always a good thing. So come watch. And like I say in every trailer, join us, won't you?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
And sharing your story and giving me an opportunity to rant too as well. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
All right.